Afternoon, guys. How you doing? I've already talked a lot this afternoon, so I'll just probably take questions. I'm not sure I have a prepared statement here, so.
Mark, how effective do you think your two first witnesses were this afternoon?
Well, I want to get out the reality that everyone in the Zimmerman family knows that that was George Zimmerman screaming. There will be a lot of other witnesses who say that as well, but we'll just present the case. We're just getting started.
Was it a street move to have him go on the same day as the Martin family got on the stand and talked about those 911 calls?
I wasn't sure how and when the state was going to end their case. I sort of had mine planned out a little bit. It's always, somewhat fluid according to how things go and how the individual witnesses do. But, I'm happy with the way it worked out.
Would you prefer to start it from fresh on Monday?
Yeah, got two witnesses down. That's okay too.
Mark Roberts is the most articulate. Why wasn't he here this week?
Why wasn't he here this week, or why wasn't he on the stand, or?
Why wasn't he in court at all? Why wasn't he involved? He was extremely
We'll
involved.
probably bring him in when the timing is right for him as a witness.
What is your opinion on the judge's decision to deny the judgment for what?
JOAs are a particular and unique animal, the way that they're handled, because you literally have to look at it and say, looking at everything that's out there and weighing it all towards the state side. They get every benefit of every doubt at this stage. I respect her ruling. It is what it is. This is what we do.
How much weight do you believe that the jury will give both grieving mothers regarding their respective testimony that this was their son on the 911 audio?
I think they will look at both and say that is certainly what that mom hopes happened.
So it's pretty much a wash.
I think so. I'm sure that Miss Fulton has to live her reality with that being Trayvon Martin screaming. And I'm certain that Mrs. Zimmerman has to live her reality that that was definitely George Zimmerman screaming. And we have to treat them as the grieving parents they are in different ways. And I'm not going to go behind why they said what they said.
Mark, what do you make of the
Do you think you'll have? How long will your case go?
This is a non-answer, but a few days. That, Wednesday, Thursday, it could go more according to some rulings that the court still has to make regarding admissibility of certain evidence. But I'm enjoying myself, so we'll go as long as we need to.
So on Wednesday, you guys asked for more time to prepare. Are you prepared now, and why weren't you prepared then?
Wednesday, we asked for more time to prepare. I think that was because of some depositions that still aren't done. There are 3 or 4 depositions we still have to take. So that's just time. It takes time. If we're here 9 hours a day, and I leave here and then go get ready for the next day, it doesn't give a lot of time for 2 or 3 or 4 hour depositions. I think that's why we had asked for the additional time.
Have you been from yet?
No, he's not done yet.
What are your thoughts on Dr. Boa's argumentativeness, his combativeness on your defense counter?
I think he is sort of a very literal person. If you ask him, is it a nice day out? I don't know if he'll want to give you his opinion. Nice is an interpretation. If you ask him if this is wood, he'll probably say yes. I'm okay with that's just his personality style. It's okay. We'll have other experts dealing with those issues, so we'll work through it.
What do you make of the notes he had in front of him? That was obviously contentious.
I don't think that English is his first language, so I think he wants to make sure that his presentation is good. I know that he's walking into a situation where we're litigators and he's a scientist. So I think that if I was going into surgery, I'd probably have a book of notes in front of me.
Mark, I know you fielded this question in the past more than a few times. Will the defendant take a stand?
We haven't made that decision yet. I think I said I have to convince myself first that the state has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt before I decide exactly how to handle that. So I'm still considering that. They seem to be done now. We are going to start presenting our witnesses, and we'll see if that includes George.
Do you believe they have proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt?
I don't think this is the process of the trial. I never thought that there was a proper case against George Zimmerman. So, they're putting on their case as prosecutors do. That's their job. And my job is to defend George, and then the jury's job is to decide who did the better, whether or not the state proved their case. And we'll get there.
Do you expect to call back any of the 39 witnesses that the state put up on?
Yes, certainly do. Yeah, a number of them.
Mark, I think some people were surprised when you questioned Miss Fulton. Can you just tell us the reasoning behind that? Some people maybe thought you were too tough. Some people didn't expect you to say anything to her and just just say, thank you for your time?
This is what I do. So every murder case I've talked to the murdered person's mother or father or sister or brother. It's what we do. You learn to try to be sensitive to what they're going through. And that with the reality that, like I said earlier, they're looking at this case and they can only live their lives with the belief that what happened to their son, Mrs. Zimmerman or Miss Fulton, was somehow somebody else's responsibility or fault. And I'm not going to bear any burden against her for that. It's a sad situation. And every time I talk to someone like that, it's very difficult. However, having said that, I certainly had to question her about it and bring out the reality that I'm sure she walked into that room wanting to hear her son's voice.
Judge
You
Nelson
seem taken
decided to just continue, obviously to let the case go on and deny. Do you think that her thinking behind that is how the jury is thinking? How worried are you that the fact that you didn't get a judgment of acquittal also means the jury is thinking that maybe the prosecution did a good job?
Oh, they're completely different standards. In the judgment of acquittal standard, literally everything has to go in favor of the state. As we know, in a criminal trial for the jury's consideration, they have to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime occurred, that my guy did it, that he did it in the way that they have to prove it, and they also have to prove that my client did not act in self-defense.
So you have those,
Do you, were you surprised by anything that the state put on?
No, I wasn't surprised by what they put on. I was probably more surprised by what they didn't put on.
That being,
Well, there are other family members in the Martin family that I would have imagined that they would have called, so that was a bit of a surprise to me. A lot of the law enforcement officers who had heavy involvement in the case was a surprise to me that they sort of excised that out of their case. So again, they can call down the case to exactly what they want to do and only present what they want, but I thought it was quite abbreviated with law enforcement, family members, and probably those two areas.
so what is your weekend looking like? You said I was working with what happened this weekend.
I'm working. I think 2 or 3 are this weekend. We'll be just getting ready. I mean, this is what we do. We get ready. We're in the middle of trial, so I'm very good with just getting ready.
You seemed surprised when the judge, when you said that you felt sorry for her loss to Sabrina Fulton. You seemed a little taken aback that she wouldn't allow you to express that.
It's funny because I think in most, if not every one of my other cases where we deal with a decedent or someone who's been lost or just seriously injured, I don't think that it's pandering to say that I'm sorry for your loss. I'm not going to be not human, and if that happens to violate or somebody wants to object to me being slightly human to a mom who's lost a son, so be it. I'm not going to change my stripes because somebody else thinks that I'm pandering.
Do you think it was strategic for the state in their questioning of Sabrina Fulton to limit their scope so as not to open the door into Trayvon Martin's character, so the cross would not be included with Trayvon Martin's marijuana use and his suspensions?
Well, that was very well crafted. They're good prosecutors. Had they gone anywhere near certain other areas, then they would have opened the door for what you now know is an extraordinary amount of information that's out there to have countered any suggestions regarding Trayvon Martin. So, as I said in the beginning, however, we want to keep this case on the 6 or 7 minutes it happened that night. Their decision not to try and bring up, evidence of Trayvon good character, and I'll just use the evidence terms, then avoids the need for me to address those other issues that might otherwise be relevant.
So that being said, you're not.
State now that the defense, now that, you're putting on his case, how is that, is he more encouraged now, is he?
I think he's still very worried. He's very stressed because here's what's going on. The state is still trying to put him away for life in a situation where he thought that he was doing only what he had to do to protect his own life. So I think he will sigh a sigh of relief when the acquittal happens, and not a moment before.
You said you wanted to keep this to 6, 7 minutes in time that this happened, so that means you won't push any further to bring Trayvon Martin's past into this case? Or?
Well, there are other issues that are out there that I think are relevant. And those include just sort of how these people got got to where they got and why they reacted the way they did. For example, they brought in George Zimmerman's fact that he had gone to some legal studies classes, right? And that he had called on other men, other black men. I think that has now made certain other elements of the evidence relevant as to what Trayvon was doing and some of his background. And that, Judge will address that next week and let us know her thoughts.
How does that make Trayvon's background relevant?
I'm sorry?
How does that make Trayvon Martin's background relevant?
Well, I mean, there's a number of issues. If you're gonna, I'll say it this way: if you're gonna bring out what George brings to the table, correct? If you're gonna bring out that George has some knowledge of investigations or something like that, then it may put on the table what Trayvon Martin may have brought to that scenario that night, talking about previous fighting and things like that. So, it's up to the judge at this point, but I was very surprised that the state decided to open up the past of George. It didn't seem particularly relevant to me. I thought it backfired, and I think it also opened up more fodder for talking about others' history.
Is that kind of balancing thing? You get a little bit of background, so we get a little bit of background, or does it have to be
No.
some kind of linkage?
No, it has to be linked. It's not just they get something and we get something, and it's not, but the more you open out the examination, concentric circles, then the wider that field covers, and that field would include that coverage on both parties. So that's the reason why I may open it.
Mark, the state keeps bringing up, quoting George Zimmerman during his 911 call, including, he looks like he's on drugs. It comes out today that Trayvon Martin was on marijuana, but the jury doesn't know that. Does that bother you a little bit?
Well, we're actually addressing that issue next week, so we'll have a final determination as to whether or not the toxicology evidence that the jury hasn't seen yet will get to see them.
The judge seemed today to say from the bench, I've already ruled on that, we're closing the toxicology results on marijuana. Has she already ruled on that?
My understanding, and I looked at the motion in the order, that the motion suggested that it was kept out because there was going to be no evidence, no witness would suggest that it had any relevance. We now have one. We have Dr. Bao who said, oh, a matter of fact, you know what, it does have some effect. And of course, we'll have others. So I think the judge, I think her standard was, prove to me that there's a connection, there's a relevance to it before you tell the jury about it. And we'll try and do that, then it'll be her decision.
What about George's past with the restraining orders and assault?
The evidence code is fairly specific as to what can be gotten into and what can't be gotten into as far as that. I would almost welcome the idea that a guy was out helping out another friend of his. They charged him, then it was dropped to misdemeanor, then he was put into pretrial diversion, then it was dropped completely. I would be quite okay with that. Were they to do that, then it would really be gloves off and a lot of other information that I'm certain they don't want to go anywhere near. Not to mention, of course, the 40 or 37 witnesses the FBI interviewed, all of whom said George is a non-racist and non-violent and a great guy, and everything else you guys know about from the discovery. So I would imagine the state is not going to be sophomoric enough to get into that information. All right?
Are you seeking to admit some of that evidence? That he's not a racist, all these witnesses that
I'm not sure that I haven't, to tell you the truth, we haven't made that final decision yet. I think the state has pushed that door open with the suggestion they did in the reports, but we'll be working on this weekend, actually. All right, guys, enjoy the weekend.